How you doing with your sign pickup?
Good. I think they're pretty much
I
there.
haven't seen many left. So.
Yeah.
I haven't seen many either. I was thinking that some people you still see.
I think we got most of ours done. I don't know if any others, but anyway. They're pretty much, that's all done.
Did you get his stormwater report for 300?
Yes, you did. We sent it to me again.
Okay, because something happened with our email server, and my email is totally screwed up. I got who got what, and you didn't get what.
You did send it to me, all 745 pages of it.
What's the discussion? That's not sure what it
It's
is.
very long.
Yeah, it's like a 12.6 megabyte.
Yeah, it is 12 meg file. So my desktop tells me it didn't get sent. My laptop tells me it did get sent.
Well, I did get it.
It was like it was like maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock it happened, right?
I know way back when there was.
Because I used to try to send an email, it's like.
Yeah, it might have been around that.
Yeah.
I think I said it before.
Yeah, that's when I got myself.
Way back when then, not.
Yeah, looks like it.
She must have. Yeah, because this used to be what it was. This, they're living in an old version. Change that.
John, I set up a meeting with
Yeah, we
Angela
changed
for next Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning.
That was one thing,
Yeah,
everything would just be.
DCD does like a tax collector manual, so I sent her that this morning.
You get your first
That's probably a
vote.
standard document, right? I don't know how unique it's
Initial
it's the way they manage it. I mean, obviously Christine's got a plan here for certain things. You obviously need Andrew to do certain things, so probably to get around the table, after the meeting, whatever, just a couple of meetings to clear it up.
It's gonna, so this initial one is gonna be with
So, and then the judgment,
DCD,
they wanted to retire it.
That'll be good.
But it's up to them. This originally was.
We need to get those evaluations
So, you know, I tried to stay away
sheet
from it.
and
On my little page.
indication.
To you?
We should have an executive session.
Yeah, I'm gonna set up before the workshop in December.
This little thing here and twist it.
Because that's going to have an impact
So I'm
on
gonna
the
pull
budget.
that out now to get the calendar out there this week.
Yeah.
So
I think it's the one on the
we'll have it,
Yeah, it's the one on the
what,
left.
an hour or 90 minutes?
And how-
An hour.
That means you have to go over it.
Yeah, yeah, right, because then we should also have discussion about, with the
New
pay.
construction manual
with the
chairs.
peers.
Oh, there we
Yeah.
go.
Yes.
Now.
Maybe
Oh,
I'll
it's
tell you
fine.
what, I'll,
Bill wants you to keep an eye on it, so.
because before the meetings, they can't, we're gonna do it
Yeah, you can press
before
those
the
off.
6th
Yep.
of December, whatever it is.
Right, before the workshop.
I'll lean back.
So you want to do it in between the next regular board meeting and the December workshop meeting?
I don't think so, unless there's a real need. Because we're not going to approve the final budget until the regular December meeting.
Okay.
You
I'm
know,
just thinking in terms of the
But
timeline.
that's what.
So you're thinking after the workshop? You would have an executive session, and go over both?
Before it,
Before,
before
literally-
36.
Yeah, the
before,
day of.
before the workshop session in December?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be after our next board meeting, which is next Tuesday.
yeah,
And you say, okay, so you want to set up some time?
yeah. Well, just right prior to the meeting, 4:30 to 6 o'clock.
Okay. So throw out some dates. Oh, you mean before the meeting? Oh, I see.
I thought it wasn't clicking, John.
Okay. Should we have any, well, yeah, I guess we'll just get together for one meeting.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
this list is really good. Thank you for getting this.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's useful, probably more than just this perspective.
And Rick has the map for up here when that's discussed.
Yep.
Actually, I like the fact they,
Forgot to.
it took out the year and 6 months. And
Yeah,
then
she
one
told
time
me
for
how
law
to print it
enforcement,
out.
as a fact, and everything.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna bring up, I didn't see it in there, so
Did
was
you
it
like
taken
that?
out completely?
Yeah, we did change that from a prior board comment, as far as the minimum, we just wanted it to be based on.
Okay.
So there's no time frame.
What do you mean, there's a time, there's a written, the first, well, we'll talk about it when we get to the meeting.
Casey, do you look from here?
Thank God. That's last week.
Yeah, it's a core.
Like early last week.
Work through it.
Oh my God.
Because when I said it was their work, it was Mr. Stroud, but so. That was good information. They used to do. It's a good story. Just that much. Oh, God, just. Send it out.
Casey, hang a little bit on my phone. 2 minutes away.
Hey, Robin, how are you? Good. Good. Are you joining us at 6? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay. Oh. Okay.
Shoot this weekend.
You what?
They have shooters.
Yes, I think there's 3
How'd it
here.
go?
Yeah, yeah, one.
And they have these, without, they have these little
Okay.
tables. Thought they were pretty cheap.
Oh, cool.
I got you. Okay, I got you.
And
Okay. Okay, very good, thank you. Yep. Good, good,
Yeah,
excellent.
I wonder if the borough,
Thanks, Mike. Okay, Robin is in, she just got back from the airport picking up her husband.
okay,
She just walked through the door, so.
all right.
We might as well get started then.
Yeah.
This is not too good, so.
yeah.
So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors workshop meeting of November the 8th, 2021. To start the meeting, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you, everyone. As a reminder, the meeting this evening is being streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and the meeting may also be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. I do have one thing I need to do, which is ask the board if we can modify the agenda, amend the agenda. There are rules, sunshine law rules now that are in place that require us to actually have a motion and approval of that motion to amend the agenda. The reason for the request is because my bad, I had asked Casey to put on here draft budget assumption discussion for tonight, and then I subsequently talked to Christine and realized this was all planned for next week. So I'd like to amend that this evening to just be continued discussion of contributions to the Goshen Fire Company and the Good Fellowship Ambulance Company.
So we're going to eliminate number 5?
I might suggest we can do two things. We can either eliminate it and not have a further conversation about the fire company, particularly since Robin and Hugh aren't here, so maybe we're changing our mind again, or we could have a conversation around the 3
Oh, good, he's here.
views here. So we could just focus it solely on a continuation of that discussion that we've had. I don't see Grant here either. There he is.
Yep. Hi, Sean.
Nice. It's the mask.
It's the masks for everybody.
Yeah. So I think that'll probably be appropriate. So I would like to ask for a motion to modify agenda item number 5, the discussion of 2022 draft budget assumption for contributions to Goshen Fire Company and Good Fellowship Ambulance Company. Would you like to make that motion?
Sure, I'll leave it.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. Welcome, Hugh. No problem. With amending the agenda, we have to do that officially with a motion and a second. So the change is just to modify number 5 to be solely focused on the contributions to the volunteer company. Okay. Are there any board questions about the motion? Any public comments or questions?
I'll make a quick question. When the budget assumptions or the preliminary budget comes out for next week's agenda, will that in fact be part of the packet that's online the Friday before the Tuesday?
My understanding is the final set of assumptions, the full line-by-line budget, and the presentation to be prepared to the board.
Correct.
That'll be publicly available on Friday and discussed on Tuesday.
Great. Very great. Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions from the public? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Modify the agenda, please. Thank you. Very good. So the first regular item then is item number 3, discussion of draft plastic bag straw ban ordinance. And Kristen, you have provided the most recent version that I believe we will be going to advertise for
You have to do it at your second meeting in December.
the second meeting in December. We're going to have a meeting to then request that advertisement, or that is when we're going to do the actual hearing for it.
That's where you're doing
So right now, the board is just reviewing to make sure that the intentions of what we previously agreed are fully captured in what you provided, correct?
it. That's correct, and it sounded like there was a confusion about what the last draft was at the SAC meeting, because there was reference to removing timeframes. That had already been done. The enforcement section had already been revised, so that if somebody violates it, the first enforcement action will be a written warning. And then the second violation, there'll be the issuance of a summary criminal citation. And these are discretionary. I mean, your code enforcement officer always has prosecutorial discretion. So if there's some, extenuating circumstance or mitigating reason why you wouldn't want to go right to a citation, you can do that. You can give another warning if you wanted to without putting that in here. But if there is nothing extenuating, you could issue a criminal citation. And on page 6, under 61-6C, that's what we changed. It used to be that it was the initial written warning, and then the first violation would be $100, second violation $200 in the first year, and $500 for the third. And I took away from one of the prior conversations we had with the board that you didn't want to have it be stuff like that. So I changed it to be that the minimum fine would be between $500 and $1,000. The judge has set that. I don't think for the first offense, won't really, this time it's the second offense, that they would issue more than $500. So what the second-class township code states is that any ordinance that you criminally enforce, you can establish what the violations are, the suggested fines, and they have to range between 100 and 1,000. So you could change that to be 100 if you wanted, and the judge would ultimately decide what's the appropriate fine.
Yeah, I recall we had that conversation, this is what we agreed on. Just one question, is there a reasonableness standard relative to the time between an initial violation that receives a written warning and then a subsequent violation that would result in this potential summary criminal citation?
That's up to you guys to decide. I mean, I mean, the way these are written is, well, this is different because every time you hand out a box, they use a non-compliant bag is a violation. So it's not like a building code violation where every day that they fail to abate the violation is a continuing violation. In those circumstances, I say once a week. I mean, again, it depends on if it's causing, you really have to look at the facts, because if it's something that's causing a harm to somebody and they're just ignoring you, I say issue a citation every day to get their attention. But in a case like this, I mean, I think it's really going to come upon your code enforcement officer to sort of have dialogue and conversation with the commercial establishment to understand why. Is it just a blatant, we're not going to comply, and, you know, we don't care what it says, then obviously you're going to take it a little bit different measure than a business that's experiencing a hardship and just says, look, you know, we really can't afford it at this time, or these are the problems we're having, and then we hope that there'll be a dialogue that leads to a resolution rather than the fines.
Okay.
Yeah, we're striving for proactive compliance, not beating somebody over the head. It's really.
And the courts, every time, I'm sure Rick will agree with this, you go to court, the first thing they say is, you try to work this out, you know, we don't want to get involved, we don't want to have to step in and deal with your code, we don't have to, so can I give you some time to talk among the parties? They always try to do that at the outset of a hearing, so we like to say that, yes, we've tried that.
Okay. So actually, I believe this kind of does address the original concern of the SAC, is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Are there any other questions from the board then? Otherwise,
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Just for clarification, will bags and straws be available for purchase at the supermarket stores? There's no reason why not. There's nothing in here. This is just for distribution by establishments that are serving food or whatever. Is that correct?
I'm confused what you mean.
Like a package of straws.
Yeah, like a package of straws or.
I don't think that you can regulate that.
Yeah.
Anything that's already
Yeah.
prepackaged is available for purchase.
Yeah.
Even if you buy, I mean, I don't think they sell like grocery bags in packages, but you can't regulate trash bags. You can't regulate Ziploc bags. You can't regulate, you know, anything that you
Trash
buy.
bags, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so it's clearly outlined in the ordinance here, there are special exemptions for medical and for those folks with disabilities. So that will not preclude them to be able to use a straw if they have a special condition. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, people can bring, yes, any person, I think, can bring their own straw to an establishment and use it. It's just that the establishment
Was
is
not provided.
giving out. Yeah.
I showed this to Ashley before the meeting. Maybe it's just a suggestion for the sustainability committee, maybe getting some of these printed up. These look pretty neat. And they would be distributed to the establishments before, well in advance of the April 22nd deadline for the ban. And they would let people know that this is coming. You know, this is something that to be aware of coming down the pike here. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, I think that the more that we can do to reach people, to let them know. So this is it says skip the straw, save the sea turtle. It's like a little thing that would go on the
this
thing.
from a local company then, or is this from, where did you get this?
Well, I got this from Rehoboth Beach, and this is what they're doing right now. They're not actually instituting a ban at this time, but they are encouraging all of the establishments to not provide straws to their customers. They have to specifically ask for a straw. And
Yeah,
that's
the
just
coastal
put-
communities are really,
Yeah.
the coastal communities are ramping that up just
Yeah.
because they have a huge problem there. I'm not in favor at all of requesting a straw. I think that straws are useless, and I think we should be. To
Understood.
be
No, I'm
honest.
just saying
Yeah.
this is an intermediate step before we get to April 22nd. Just something to
Right,
consider.
right,
Just to kind of ease people into it. And it's really critical. There's like, what, 98 businesses that you have listed here?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's really important in my mind that all these folks be, you know, all stakeholders, so they have to be fully engaged in this rollout, in this whole process. Again, it's a matter of coming up with a plan about how to educate the public and executing that plan. I think that's really, really critical. Because otherwise, people are just going to be pushing back on it. And we'd rather people to understand the reason why we're instituting this ban and buy into it.
Let's talk about how things are going when we are with the kind of engagement.
Okay.
First, I just want to, I'm conscious of Kristen needing to move to another committee. So if there's anything specific around the language or the proposed ordinance that we're going to review in December, we can just finish that up, make sure there's nothing else left, and Kristen can move on.
Yeah, I had 3 specific examples here of plastic bags. This is one here that you would typically get at an Acme or a food store. But then they also had these other things too here, which claim that they are reusable bags. Now, is this something that would these be based also on the?
That's an extruded bag.
So this would be considered the extruded bag.
Yeah.
So to make that clear. So what they're trying to pass off as reusable bags will not be acceptable under this.
Any other questions,
Which is
John?
why that language is really important. I'm glad that it's in there. So I think that we've made the changes, we talked about it, and then it's good from our perspective.
Very good. Thanks, Kristen.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll advertise it, like I said, it only requires a 1-week advertisement. I would post it on your website, but it's not maybe like something broad that you can see it in advance. And
Well, we can use our social media.
Absolutely, we'll push it out
Yeah.
multiple times a month, but
But the newsletter as well.
yeah, I've got the e-newsletter coming out at the end of the month, and the quarterly paper, so.
Okay, thank you.
okay, thank you. Thanks, guys.
I just want to share too, I was contacted by, I don't know what his name is, I can't recall. He has a streaming show, it's called Spotlight or something, local. And he wants to have me on probably this weekend to talk about it. So, yes, the more that we can get the message out, and I expect that more people will probably be coming to the board to ask questions and do good stuff.
So if I can just ask Chris and Ashley or Tina as well, you've obviously done this, this looks great, have a list of establishments that are going to have those kind of bags that John just showed us, and then you've even got them plotted on a map of the township here, which is cool. But so in terms of, what do we see happening here, maybe just a short, in the near term through the end of the year, is there some specific activities the SAC is planning around? What are the next steps with this?
So this was sort of the first thing that we wanted to do. We wanted to get the list. It was discussed at the SAC meeting that we thought the best course of action to reach the most businesses is either, well, probably both of these. In my opinion, we should do both. Is to reach out and hold a session for business owners to come here, so we can hold just a Q&A dialogue session, whatever it is, a little workshop for business owners. We might even have 2 of those, depending on time and everything, before April, before it goes into effect. And then we also talked about sending flyers to these businesses because we thought that might be the best way to reach them. And if need be, we'll go out on foot too.
When we engage in dialogue with them, will we have ideas or suggestions or solutions to the questions that they raise, or is it going to be more an explanation of, well, here's what the old ordinance is about, this is when it goes into effect, and you need to figure out what you're going to do. How are we going to make it more helpful than we're doing this, we'll let you know, you've got some time to figure it out. Is there a way we can help them, or what do we see?
Yeah, there are so many other municipalities and cities across the nation that have done this around the world, so there's plenty of information to pick from to model. And again, we have less than 100 businesses, which is a lot for us, but other places have done thousands of businesses, so we can model something off of
Are the SAC on point to be able to have that information available for that session?
The SAC's been very good about
Okay.
getting
I'm
organized.
just out of the loop.
No, absolutely, and I'm very eager to share it with all of you. They're
Cool.
very on top of it, so we'll have a whole list of probably frequently asked questions, but you'd be able to answer.
That's great, because I just driving here, or actually not driving home from Chesland, in a beautiful natural lands park today, as I drove on Grove Road, and then they got over 2 of those plastic bags, brand new. They weren't there when I left them.
Now, admittedly, I have found myself at Acme without my reusable bags, and I just put them in my cart and walk to my car, because I will not pick up, I can't be seen holding a plastic bag now. So I'm there putting it all. And so, it's going to take some getting used to, Sometimes you forget your bag. What are we going to have to do? It's going to have to be a sort of change that, but it's societal, and other places have done it successfully.
Any other discussion on the work with the SAC and where we are. Any questions or comments from public? Okay, good.
I'm sorry, I think that's the date of the hearing.
It's the December
December 21st.
21st.
Yeah, that's our regular meeting in December.
Okay, next on the agenda is item number 4, discussion of 2022 budget allocation request from the Goshen Fire Company. With us this evening is Chief Everhart. Welcome, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
It's a good time of year to be talking about money, budget setting process and everything else, so we just to, I don't know if Casey's advised you already, but we had conversations previously with the board around fire company contributions and GFAC contributions. It was kind of prior to your request coming in, and then when we looked at that information, we said, can we schedule you to come and talk about the current financial status of the fire company, how you managed through the pandemic period when some of your key fundraising activities were really curtailed and some canceled completely, like in 2020. And understand where you are with the analysis of what is a sustainable financing approach for the fire companies. So over to you.
So we did a look back, 2017, 2018, 2019. And we, in 2019, maybe early 2020, we were meeting with the townships, sort of on an informal basis to take a look at what the future contribution model should be for the fire company. It's been, historically, it's been informal. Each township has basically developed their own appropriation scheme or contribution scheme for us, and we were trying to get a funding model that was more in line with some measurables such as property assessment, call volumes, things like that. And then as COVID hit, we had to suspend those meetings and those discussions. And we were very concerned going into 2020 with the onset of COVID, knowing that we were going to have to start canceling things like our flower sales, the Goshen Fair, any in-person fundraising, which is a critical component of our financial model. Fortunately, the development of the PPP loan programs and some of the other COVID funding models that presented themselves as revenue replacement strategies for us, we were able to take advantage of them. We did get a PPP loan in 2020 and also in 2021. So we completed the forgiveness application for the 2020 loan, and we're in the process of doing the same for the 2021 loan. Both of those PPP loans / grants sustained us through the last 2 years with the loss of the typical fundraising that we normally enjoy.
Were they a total replacement of your normal fundraising contributions, or were they like 80%?
Yes, they were.
Complete replacement?
Yes, they were. And it wasn't just the PPP grants. The county offered us a $50,000, basically a stipend for revenue replacement. The state of Pennsylvania, the Office of the State Fire Commissioner, had a revenue replacement grant program as well. There's some money we got through the CARES Act. So this is all, it's been tremendous news for us to keep us whole through the COVID crisis. But knowing that we're going to go into 2022 probably without the opportunity to apply for those types of funding strategies. So our contribution request is really based on where we were back in 2018, 2019. So we're back to ground zero in terms of our funding request and funding costs. So yeah, 2021, 2020, 2021, we were okay.
Let me just ask a couple of questions on the 2020, 2021 period. So we increased our contribution for this year for you.
Yes.
Knowing the situation you're in with the, likability of fundraise, you obviously would be seeking these other funding sources for loans, grants, etc. So, just to be perfectly kind of blunt, did you get more money in 2020 and 21 than you would have without any of the normal, without any of these extraordinary type contributions that you receive in grants?
In 2020, we were about 75,000 in the black.
Okay.
In 2021, we're forecasting it to be about 14,000.
In the red. And how many other municipalities contribute to you? I'm sorry, I should have done some research on it.
I'm happy to answer. So, of course, East Goshen, it's our home township. They contribute. West Goshen, Westtown Township, and Willistown Township.
And
Thornbury, Thornbury.
We don't get any Thornbury is wholly covered by the Westchester Fire Department.
Yeah.
We provide mutual aid, but we don't get any.
did East Goshen, Westtown, or Willistown increase their contributions in 21 or not, compared to the previous year's funding?
Yes, they did. So in 2018, so they've done incremental increases every year. In 2018, East Goshen was 291,000. I'm rounding there.
Yeah.
291,000. In 2021, they'll be at 369,000. In 2018, Westtown was at 88,000, and in 2021, they'll be at 92,000. And Willistown, 2018 was at 52,000, and in 2021, they'll be at 60,000.
What's primary coverage for Willistown?
We cover about 20% of the township. Out Westchester Pike, Delchester Road, that corner. And so they just awarded us ARPA money. They had a pool of money for their fire company. They also have four fire companies. Malvern, Willistown, Malvern, Paoli, Goshen, and Newtown Square. And they awarded us 17% of the ARPA fund that they handed out. So in their view, we're 17% of their coverage. So as we sort of informally try to get to this funding formula, looking at property assessments and call volumes and things like that, we see East Goshen at even around 50% of our activity or risk that we're covering. We see West Goshen at about 30%, Westtown 12 to 14%, and Willistown's about 7%. So, we're not asking for a contract away. For example, the Westchester Fire Department does it with their townships. We're just trying to sort of get everybody sort of in the same goal. And that's sort of the background for the request of the additional funds this year, is to get West Goshen sort of on par with the other townships in terms of the values and the number of calls they respond to.
Yeah, so we had been at 126 for several years, and then we increased last year to 215. Just get rounding. And then your request this year was for 256, and you're saying that's based on this model of basically the activity, the call volume, and that would represent 30% of the funding needed to have in 2020.
30% of the municipal contribution. Just as some background of where we get our money from. On an annual budget, about 40% of our revenue comes from EMS billing. About 30% or so comes from township contributions. 28% from donations and fundraising. And donations would be our EMS subscription program for the ambulance. And then included in that is things like the fair and the flower shows. And then about 2% would be other income, smaller, would be grants and other income. But the big chunks are EMS billing, municipal contributions, and donations and fundraising.
I'm sorry, what was that 40%, the first number? That you put revenue, the source is that from?
Ambulance billing for ambulance calls.
Oh, for billing?
What can you tell us about the expenses of the fire company? Where do you spend most of your money?
Payroll. Payroll is our single largest expense. We have 12 full-time firefighter EMTs and on about 20 part-timers. It works out to about 16 FTEs per year, 15 to 16.
Do you have a rough idea of that number of when you add up all the payroll with that?
$1,950,000.
Almost $2 million in payroll. And would you consider yourself short-staffed or?
So the prime driver for that is our EMS calls. We run about 4,000 EMS calls a year, which is way more than a volunteer service could hope to cover. So our model uses firefighter EMTs to fill that position. It gives us, obviously gives us ambulance coverage, and it also provides staffing for fire calls as well. But we still have a fairly strong volunteer base. I would say we have about 50 very active volunteer firefighters right now. So, you know, we have concerns. We have times a day that are, you know, we're concerned about having, you know, enough staff. But there's, you know, we leverage our mutual aid partners. You know, they have issues, but we help each other. We go into Westchester all the time. They come out to help us, Malvern, East Wyland, West Wyland. We have strong mutual aid agreements with them. And I don't know if you're aware, East Goshen helps us staff an engine during the Public Works Department staffs an engine for us during the daytime. And that engine can go to any of the 4 townships that we cover and beyond. So I think we're in pretty good shape, you know, but we're always, you know, beating the drum for volunteers.
And you said, what are you this year, or how much in the red?
This year we're forecasting about 14,000.
14K in the red.
What's your apparatus replacement situation?
So Goshen, we do things maybe a little differently than some. We have a reserve fund. It's an investment fund specifically for fire apparatus. And depending on the performance of the stock market or whatever, depends on how much we put into it every year. We've had pretty good returns this year, so we put $10,000 a month into that. Some years we have to put $20,000 a month in. We've been in pretty good shape last couple of years. So we maintain that fund, and that fund, as it, you know, as the interest grows within that fund, we know that we can replace an engine in 2024, an engine in 2025. Our tower's scheduled to be replaced in 2035. That's the longest replacement date apparatus that we have. So we, in fact, just met on it today. We think our apparatus replacement fund's very strong right now. But included in our expenses is the fact that we take $10,000 and put it into that fund every month. So we wouldn't have a, you know, an unexpected capital requirement in 2024. It's all built into
Does that tend to approximate when the depreciation would be?
So I don't know if you know Tom Stallmaker. He has a spreadsheet this big, and it shows the value of the apparatus when we bought it, value today, replacement value.
The replacement cost is what's getting killed.
That's all factored in. He knows what the trade-in amount's going to be. He knows how much the Relief Association kicks in, because the Relief Association kicks in 25% of the cost of every piece of apparatus. So that's all part of our plan. We're in good shape for apparatus replacement. And in fact, we actually, in our planning, we've started to downsize our fleet because we know that, you know, when 8 pieces of apparatus or whatever, you're not going to send 8 pieces of apparatus out the door every time. So, you know, we're starting to be more efficient in the way we design our equipment so that they're multi-purpose vehicles.
What's ISO say about that?
As long as we have the pumping capacity, we have plenty of pumping capacity and water tank capacity, and we will continue to do so. Where we consolidate will be probably in our heavy rescue category. You know, as the neighborhood of the community has evolved, we get fewer vehicle accidents, fewer serious vehicle accidents with airbags and safety equipment. The severity of the accidents has dropped way off. So we can handle almost any vehicle accident scenario we have with the equipment we carry on our pumpers. And if something significant occurs, we've got a fire company right up the street, and we would just use their ship.
Yes, Spain has a real good heavy rescue.
So how do you want to, do you want us to each just share sort of how we go about this?
I just had a couple more questions. So the EMS billing, what's been the trend on that? Have you seen it? Is it keeping up with inflation? Are you struggling more and more to get reimbursement from the insurance? Because I remember when GFAC were here, that was a sore point for them, was their inability to get the insurance payments to reflect the cost of the service. And the cost, you know, the number of calls they're getting is going up and up.
Yes. So we have the same issues. Yeah, you know, you bill whatever we bill, $800 for a transport. And the majority, the significant majority of our transports are Medicare transports, and Medicare will pay you only $400 a transport, no matter what you bill. And I don't think that has gone up much over time. I'm not an ambulance billing expert, but I know that it's been a fairly fixed amount. And I think there's a House bill to maybe make some changes, but there's, you know, some insurance companies pay the policy holder, and it's tough to get the policy holder to send us the check for the transport. We have a very effective EMS billing company that we use, and his return is really good, but you know, it's clearly not a money-making proposition. You know, the return on what you get in billing doesn't cover the cost of the service. But you know, that's why we have other income sources helping.
So why don't you pursue a more formal contract arrangement with municipalities like West Goshen Fire have done?
It's not that we wouldn't want to. I think we were on a path to try to do that a few years ago. And it's probably as things are kind of settling down, it's time to maybe go back at that.
Look at it again.
Yeah. You know, we're a different entity than the borough of Westchester. You know, we sort of look at things a little different, maybe from more of a community point of view. That's a very much business-driven kind of arrangement that's been set up, and certainly seems to be working very well. Yeah, maybe that's the next phase, is to really go after more of a contract. We'd have to get 4 townships to agree to it.
Well, my last question is, for 2022, have you had any acceptance of your proposed requests from the other 3 townships?
So we have, yes, we have. And they've all agreed to escalate, but they're in the same process you are, is going through their budget approval processes. So they haven't committed absolutely to the escalation numbers. They've given us numbers as budget figures, but.
And what is East Goshen's 2022? What's your request from them?
Our request is $416,000.
And what did they provide to you last year in 2021?
369.
269?
369. So is that the same proportionate increase as request for us? Do you have?
Actually, ours is 41,207.
As a percent, though?
Yeah, and theirs is 70,000, but their percentage is 50% versus 30.
Does anyone else have questions for Brian? What we've been discussing?
Well, I just have some comments. Personally speaking, you know, I understand that you guys are going to be 14,000 in the red, but we're going to be 700,000 in the red. And it is my job to get us out of that. That's what I want to get us out of. We want to balance our budget this year. And our contributions to the fire companies play a large role in if we're going to be able to do that or not. And so, trust me, I think it's honorable what the fire company's doing. I know that you're in a tough position, so are we. I'm not even going to question how you guys run your ship over there. I'm sure you know you're doing a great job. We're trying to run our ship, trying to keep things steady. I can't bring myself to increase anything right now. I can't bring myself to increase this when we're looking at a deficit of $700,000 in our own township. We're trying to cut everywhere we can. The jump from 126 to 215 was understandable. We were in the beginning of the pandemic. You guys had a pretty successful fundraiser this year. And as far as where I'm sitting, I don't think we really have any more to give than the 215 at least.
So, just so I'm clear, you're actually still supportive of the 215 level. You're not proposing
At most, I mean.
reversion back to a 2020 funding level.
Well, I haven't said that, no.
Okay.
I actually think that that is on the table. We are pulling for dimes here.
Okay. Thank you. John or you, any comments?
I think the service is rendered by the fire service.
Excuse me, can you talk to the
Is cheaper than half the price.
Okay. So were you supportive of the requested amount or of the previous
Yeah,
year's?
supportive of the requested amount.
Thank you. You? Thanks. John?
Well, I'm trying to get my head around the request for this year, which was $130,000 higher than the request back in 2020. That's 2 years' time, which represents, it's over 100% increase from pre-COVID. I know we're still dealing with that, and still working our way through it, but it's such a big increase from what it was 2 years ago. I'm perfectly willing to support your request if I can understand and justify it. Better understand what your revenue stream has been, especially now with the fair being had this past year, and what your expenses are. I mean, if you could share with us, I don't know if this is proprietary information or not, but your budget, for this 2022 coming up, so they have a better understanding of why you want to have such a higher increase from what it was from just 2 years ago. Not that I wouldn't support it, it's just that I had to have a better understanding, because I have to explain, like to Ashley's point, to our taxpayers, why we're increasing our contribution to the fire company that's been over 100% from what it was 2 years ago.
So just a little bit of background. We talked about the $126,000 ask in this 2020. That wasn't an ask from us. West Goshen's paid us $126,000 for the 11 years prior with no escalation. Meanwhile, the Westchester Fire Department, you entered into an agreement with them to pay probably 3 times that much. When we cover 45% of West Goshen Township, and then you add on the fellowship on top of that, whatever the contribution to the fellowship is, that's really the whole number of what is paid to Westchester Fire EMS operations versus what the Goshen Fire Company is now requesting. So I understand, I absolutely understand. I don't want, personally don't want to pay more taxes. I understand the $700,000 is a deep, deep hole to be in. Just, I ask that you understand that West Goshen was, I think, on a fairly low side of the contribution for a long period of time until we started to have these meetings. And, the last increase was tremendous. It was a lot of money. I think we're asking for just, it seems like a lot, but just gets us up into more of an equitable share with the other
I
towns.
would love to take money from Westchester Fire Department and give it to you.
So I would, personally, I would relook at that contract and see what they say is the share between
When did
Goshen
we get into
and...
that contract?
2019.
So the board voted on that in 2018. So I wasn't on the board at that
No, I
time.
understand. I think it's characterized as a 70-30 split between Goshen and Westchester.
Meaning Westchester is 70 and Goshen is 30.
When I think in actuality it's probably closer to 45, 55 or something like that. I don't want, that's kind of a rabbit hole, I don't think we need to go down at this point.
I don't know, for me, I'm not even asking for you to justify how you are operating your budget over at the fire department, because that's your business.
Right.
And we can give what we can give.
I understand.
And we have to justify our budget to our taxpayers. And in my own finances, in my own personal life, if I have $700,000 in debt, I wouldn't be contributing more money to, I'd be taking care of in-house things. Can we pay our bills? Can we keep the lights on? Can we, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where my thought is right now. Maybe next year we'll be in a different position.
I understand.
Well, I just want to speak on that. You provide an essential service, a critical essential service which we have to support, and we will. But just the question is what is a sustainable amount of contribution from this township to your organization to be able to maintain them?
Right.
And to be able to explain how you came up with this number. Some algorithm, whatever you mentioned, would be quite helpful. But I fully support your service, and whatever it needs to take to continue that has to be sustained. But we have to understand why. What basis are you using?
So, the algorithm is pretty straightforward. We make X amount of money on EMS building. We make X amount of money on donations and fundraising. The Goshen Fair was very successful this year. We have 6 great nights. We go into next year and we could have 3 nights of rain, and it's a completely different story. And then, my job is to go after grants. To get I bring them out as much as I can. I get as much money into the fire company as I possibly can. But at the end of the day, there's still a gap, and it's about 30% of our income. And the forecast really needs to come from municipalities. And if that number's 30%, I'm happy to go through what our budget looks like with you. But of that 30%, we try to split it up equitably between the 4 townships that we cover, again, based on call volume and property assessment. Same model that Westchester uses.
So for those, that decade where contributions were flat from West Goshen, I'm just trying to kind of get the math here. So if 30% of your income is coming from township contributions, and are we about 50, we're about 30 to 40% of your township contributions. We're only 10, 12% of your total income. Is that right?
Yeah, so
when it's a flat amount for 10 years, the fact that it was only this amount of your income was kind of manageable for you because maybe you had successful fairs or other fundraisers. But you were getting into a hole in this 2018-19 time frame, and that's why you were coming to say we need to look at this more deeply. So I'm just painting the story. You tell me if it's incorrect. So it's just fortuitous that in 2021, with COVID and some of the grants and the fact that we made a substantial increase, that kind of took that immediate pressure right there and then off you a little bit, weirdly. But now we're looking at, well, we still have to address a problem that we just avoided for 2 years talking about. Is that a fair summary of it? Okay. Any other questions? Is there any questions from members of the public? Go ahead.
Can I just sit here?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Thank you first for all your department does. When Good Fellowship, when the library came before the board to ask for their annual contribution, they went over their financials, but they also said financials are available on the website. Anybody can go look at them. So tonight, that's what I thought I'd do. I'd go look at the website, and as John was alluding to, as a taxpayer, and I hope as a board, you would actually look at their financials or have available, have those available to you. You've been very transparent in putting out the numbers, but I think to actually see the numbers, I mean, we know about the PPP loan, but personally, I'd like to know how much those PPP loans were. So that's just one point. And then also I noticed when I was looking at some information that a grant opportunity, FEMA opened a $414 million grant for fire companies today. It was posted, and it's closing 12/17. So are you aware of that one? You're looking at that one? Okay. And then also you mentioned the deficit this year. What's your cash on hand, though? Do you have, you mentioned you have a capital equipment fund, but you also have a reserve fund.
So let's step back to your question about the first.
What's the financials on the website?
Okay, so we don't post our financials on the website, but we do provide the township with a copy of our annual audit, which has most of that information. And you may have that. It just came out, so I don't know if you have it. They get a copy of our annual audit, which has all of our financials in it. And then on the federal grant that you mentioned, we applied for last year. We got a grant for $350,000. That's specifically for fire, but we want the self-contained breathing apparatus. So that's sort of a pass-through. So we got the grant, but we turned around and spent it. There's also a copay, so $50,000 copay. So we do, every year, we apply for those grants.
Okay. And so most likely you will be a recipient of that.
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned the Goshen Fire Club, so you do have a fundraiser. What's the difference between the club and the department?
So Good Fellowship Club, is that?
No, do you also have a fundraising separate arm?
So our residents can purchase basically a subscription for our EMS service. If you purchase the subscription, there's no out-of-pocket for an ambulance transport. So that's a pretty significant fundraiser for us. That subscription service.
All right, and which I did look at that today, and I will, for the first time, be funding that. So thank you. All right, that's kind of all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions, Grant? Well, thank you, Grant. We've got, as you know, we're in the middle of our budget process. We have deliberations here. We may continue to talk about it. You're welcome to stay here, see if we can, get to any conclusions tonight. We are missing one of our board members. We appreciate all you do, and we have used your service, and I'm very delighted for it. Thank you.
Thanks. Same as you, we're in the middle of our budgeting process. We have to make some hard decisions. The forecasted deficit for this year and next year, we'll try to work them out of the budget the best we can. Just hope, as you talk about your $700,000 deficit, that obviously fire emergency services in general, that it's proper priority in all of them discussions.
Thank you very much.
One of the things that the board might be interested in is the number of volunteer man hours that are contributed. And put a price on it.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's been, Casey, a monthly report that has our call-in hours.
Yeah, well,
Something like the Goshen Fair, I can't even think of.
Yeah, it was already on my call reports years ago. So.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of man hours.
You figure at a nominal rate of $25 to $30 an hour.
It's a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so that was agenda item number 4. And then we one here was agenda item number 5, the modified agenda item was to, decide we wanted to hear the conversation, if there's any way we were going to come to a conclusion, provide additional guidance to Christine tonight, or whether it's wrong enough in here, maybe roll it all into next Tuesday's meeting. What do you want to do for it?
I think next Tuesday's going to be really long.
Okay. Do you want to make a decision tonight?
I don't know if you're all ready to make a decision. I personally ready to make a
Okay.
decision.
I mean, one comment I would have, how do we get to a situation where we ended up with a contract with Westchester Fire Department, but we didn't end up looking at the full picture and trying to make a consistent approach at the same time? So it might, a lot of service, to have that differentiation to Grant's point of a 3-to-1 contribution back in 2019, Westchester versus Goshen, versus the level of service they provide in the township seems odd.
The background was that the contract with Westchester was based on the apparatus replacement.
Okay. They had some needs then.
Each fire company in Westchester is an independent organization. They own their own buildings. They maintain their own buildings. The borough pays for the electric bill, I think, and that's about it. It's supportive of individual fire companies. But in that sense, that they have a lot of support. They do a letter drive every year, and they have the buildings themselves that they can rent, and they do rent them for various organizations. So they have an income stream other than you'd normally think. Goshen also has the building rental, but that obviously was cut out in the last couple of years.
Did Christine put the 2021 numbers into the budget or the 2022 request?
I believe she put in the 2021 request. Until the board
It
did
was
it.
current budget year.
Anyhow, the borough number was based on apparatus cost and replacement,
Yeah.
as opposed to the total operating budget.
That's what I would like to see. I mean, does Goshen Fire Company have a 5-year plan in place for equipment replacement as well as any capital improvements? I just feel like I don't have enough information here to be able to.
John, they just started doing that. Up prior, they were sort of a seat of the pants organization. They weren't sophisticated. Grant has really brought them into the modern era, so to speak.
Well, I heard him say tonight that they have, some truck replacements in 24, 25, and then a tower.
They also said they're okay.
I mean, they have a plan as how they're funding it, they're making a contribution to a capital fund, and then getting the market returns to drive money to buy, right? So they have a plan. I presume that plan is supported by the request number that's provided. Okay, so what's the board's position? You says this, do you support the request?
I would support 250, yes.
Okay, John?
I would support what we gave them last year, the 215.
Okay, actually,
I would actually say 126.
you want to go back to 126? I am at not an increase this year. I could be persuaded that 215 is, I forget how we arrived at that specific number.
It was just, they requested it.
They requested it, that was based on, they're trying to implement the same rationale as the Westchester contract, which is service calls, service area, and call line. So they're trying to do that, it's not perfect.
When's the Westchester contract up?
It's a 10-year, so 2019.
2029.
2029.
So we don't have a consensus.
No, it's not. Unless, actually, you could come up with that. You could come down to a compromise here.
No, wait for Robin.
Or we could run.
Well, one thing for sure, we've talked about it quite a lot, so hopefully it won't, if we do defer it until next week, it's not going to take long to resolve this particular item on the budget discussion. If there's any further conversation you
Well, Bonnie persuades me of why 126 is too small.
Because I believe when I first came on the board in 2019, before I ran, I went with you to meet with Grant and some staff, and they had all the other townships in there, and they explained how the current model was not financially sustainable, and that clearly they needed to have a more sustainable model for township contributions in this, coming this requesting, and that each board decides whether, boards change all the time, and it was too variable for them at the levels they were at then. Now, they never got to a point of coming and saying, this is the model we want to have a contract. That was my question too. Why haven't you come to the same point? I think COVID disrupted the plan to do that, because there were going to be follow-up meetings, and they never happened because COVID came along. So I personally would like to see a more formal arrangement with the fire companies based on the same consistent calculation of service that's provided. As the service goes up, then we should pay more. It doesn't bother me about capital assets and how they can be duplicated. Everyone's got the same stuff, and you really need all of it. But that aside, clearly to me, there is a problem between the amount we fund for Westchester Fire and Goshen. I think Goshen's too low, and I think Westchester's probably a little high. But for right now, I was comfortable with meeting their request for 21. I'm not going to.
I also don't think that this is a sustainable model for West Goshen at the time.
For Westchester or
For us.
For us.
For our own budget. I mean, if you started from a zero-based budgeting, okay, and we prioritize the things that we care most about in the township, and we went down from there.
This would be one of them.
It would be one of them. And so if you want to give them what they're asking, or even just the 215, then in my mind, we cut from somewhere else. But that means we cut a lot from somewhere else. I had a whole exchange with Christine today over email. She and I have been talking. I want so badly for us to get out of this deficit, and so does she. It does not look good for our bond rating. It's bad. My point is if we're starting from zero-based budgeting, what do? You look at your payroll first, which is where most of our expenses are going in the township. And then you look at things like services, essential services, fire, police. And then you look at all the other stuff that if you want to give them this amount of money, and I'm not opposed to it because I think you're right, I think that it's worth the money, then I think we need to go back and cut seriously from other places.
Okay, that's fine. That means it's part of a board budget discussion. I can't do it in isolation. I need to see the full budget and make those choices next week. Okay. Is that okay, John?
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, we did do a fair amount of cutting, in the capital expenditures and all that already, so we did a lot of that, even with the police department, so we can continue that process. But I think it is important that we do fund the fire departments for what they, for the services that they provide. I'm still not convinced, though, when the number that they're requesting is a valid number. I still don't feel the justification for that.
Okay.
Especially with the reduction in volunteerism in today's world compared to even 5 or 10 years ago. What's happening is that the fire service, our beautiful volunteer group that was free, is now becoming slowly a paid department. And you have to take that into consideration. What you need to do is make sure that you coddle the volunteers a little bit anyhow.
And you have to hire some full-time folks to make up for the volunteers who are no longer there. It's happening all across the state. But again, I'd just like to see the numbers there. I mean, show us how many volunteers they had back in 2016, 18, and 19.
That's exactly what I asked them, John. I asked them for the call hours.
And give us some numbers to justify it.
Okay. So we're going to table a decision, Casey, until full budget discussion.
Just for clarification, I heard a couple numbers going around. The Goshen Park Company, they provide 45% of the services for West Goshen Township and 55% is provided by the West Central Fire Department, or is it 70-30?
I didn't capture those.
Yeah, I think Grant threw both sets out. I'm not sure that was accurate.
Okay. So we don't know what the actual percentage is?
But it fluctuates.
Goshen Fire Company provides about 30 to 35% for West Goshen, and about 50% for East Goshen, and about, I forget what I heard.
Well, I meant, for our services for West Goshen Township, what percentage is provided
We
by?
don't have that number tonight.
Pardon?
We don't have that number
Yeah,
tonight.
that's what I heard, two different numbers being
The
thrown out.
numbers he gave were what they spend their activities on.
We're listing it with
Call
17%.
volume. Call
West
volume
Campus
is
was
43. Well, the call volume is way up for EMS.
Okay, so the specific number you want, probably better kind of getting through Casey for Grant or whatever else.
Okay, good enough.
All right, moving on, agenda item number 6, discussion of possible transfer of acreage to the township as part of the redevelopment of the former Westchester Area School District property on Building Site. So I had asked Casey to put this on the agenda just for a conversation around what's being constructed and all that stuff, what is being proposed, and the benefits of it, and the risks of it, and where we need to make a decision at what point. So I don't know, if Rick or Casey, you want to give us the background?
Okay, so the Stanberry LLC is currently under agreement of sale for the former Spellman Building, Westchester School District Administration Building on Bailey Pike. Due to floodplain, wetlands, et cetera, in the rear of the property, they can only develop right along Bailey Pike. So they're proposing an all-day grocery store and 2 smaller pad sites up closer towards Bailey Pike. The rear of the property is unbuildable due to the floodplain again and wetlands that exist. It's approximately 10.83 acres. And as we all know, anytime we get probably over an inch or 2 inches of rain, Montgomery Avenue floods. We've been after PennDOT for decades to correct the problem there at Montgomery Avenue, and PennDOT doesn't have the will or the money to make any changes. So I saw this, and the developer saw this as a possible opportunity to implement some stormwater controls on Goose Creek. Just to the east of here are the kind of headwaters for Goose Creek. So this would, if designed in a very innovative way, we don't have any ideas yet about what. Rick and I were talking this afternoon about it. We could engineer, again, some kind of innovative design that would retain some of the floodwater before it impacts Montgomery Avenue and impacts the borough. During Ida, 8 inches of rain in 6 hours inundated the normal area all the way down to Ramsgate Apartments. So this is just an opportunity. There is very little open space in West Goshen, especially along the Goose Creek corridor, to make any positive changes to the stream. So through, and Rick can expand on this, preparing buffer plannings, innovative stormwater design on this 10.83 acres, we could possibly at least help the situation downstream, because there's really no other open space currently available that we could utilize for any kind of flood control. There's also one intervening issue on the very northeast side. If you can see where Turner Ave kind of curves to the right, the township maintains a small storage yard there. They've had that for probably 20 years, and it extends into the school district property. Of course, with school district approval from 20 plus years ago, that would then fully become township property, so we would not lose that yard for storage of stone and other, we store pipe there and other things as well. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. Rick, if you have any ideas on, it's pie in the sky right now for, you'd have to have some engineering proposals and designs out there.
Yeah, it would definitely requires some significant design, but if we own the property, we have the opportunity to do that. If the developer keeps control of the property, they've agreed to keep it open space, but they're certainly not going to make any improvements to it. There'd be no incentive to do that. So I think it is an opportunity for us to get the property, maintain it well, improve the condition of it with regard to stormwater. And if there's an opportunity to, expand the floodplain, increase the riparian buffer, do whatever, maybe do a constructed wetland in there to supplement the wetlands that are already there. I don't know exactly what's going to work, but there are opportunities there that we don't have if we don't own the property. And the fact that the developer is willing to basically give it to us, I think is pretty beneficial. We're not losing anything in taxes because it's not taxable, hasn't been taxable as school district property. Plus, the taxes on floodplain and wetland aren't all that generous to begin with. So I don't really see too much of a downside to it. And it has the potential for stormwater improvements. And, Goose Creek is a mess. It's a mess throughout. And is this going to fix all the problems? Absolutely not. But it's an opportunity to improve some of the conditions. So.
We're expecting from the redevelopment of the parcel there to get, hopefully, a big improvement in the stormwater flow off that property at least, right?
Well, there's going to be
best practice for what will. My understanding is there's virtually nothing there now. If I remember
There's
right.
virtually nothing there now, so the improvements will be significant over what's there now, but there's a fair amount of impervious surface that's got to be dealt with, so I don't think that's going to make a real visible improvement to Goose Creek. I mean, numerically it's an improvement, and it certainly is helpful, but I don't think the development itself is going to give any significant improvement to Goose Creek.
Can you give me between, what I was really trying to go with that is, let's say this overall parcel to give you X improvement. Is half of X going to come from what you're going to demand from the redevelopment of the parcel itself, and half of the improvement that could come from whatever you come up with for the rest of the 10 acres? Or is it more like, it's 30% from the front, and whatever we come up with would give a 70% factor to improve?
I think it's probably higher than that. I think you might be getting 10 to 20% on the redevelopment.
Yeah.
Potential for
A lot more back
on the additional 10 acres.
Okay. Any other board comments or questions for Rick, Casey?
Well, we had a meeting with, what's his name, Mike Dunn, the arborist from the borough, and some folks from CRC several months ago. And we walked through this area, and they had a lot of ideas about things that can be done to mitigate, the flooding, and create more of a natural floodplain that would perk the water, so to speak. So, yeah, I mean, if we don't own it, then we don't have that opportunity to be able to pursue those different options.
There's residents, are there residences back there? I know that up the
On
road.
the north side?
Yeah.
No, the residences,
Further up.
the residents are way over here.
Exactly. So I was just wondering if that extended that way, but you're saying it doesn't?
No.
It's not.
No, quarters on turnaround.
Although another thing that we had in mind, which is not necessarily stormwater related, is to put a pedestrian connection from in here somewhere through this property up through here, which again, if we own it, and we own the other side of the street beyond the shopping center up to Lincoln Avenue, we could put a pedestrian connection up virtually right to Lincoln Avenue from here. Again, we own the property.
Yeah.
That would link to school, Henderson, down to that area.
I don't think there's any downsides either.
We don't, whatever we come up with, we can seek grants to do it. But at the end of the day, we're not going to get a grant for 100% of the cost. So whatever we come up with will be another project of $1 million something to fund from township revenues. So nothing is free in this world, and we'll try to make a change of the relative, I won't say a step change, because I know you're not saying that's what it is, Rick, but to make a substantial improvement will still cost the township significant money down the road.
Yeah, and it is Goose Creek. We have an existing TMDL. There's a lot of work that we've got to do to meet that TMDL. You know, the more area we have to try to implement improvements, the better possibility we have to meet.
So that's a positive for it as well. This gives us the opportunity to do things on our own property and not go to private property.
That's right.
We need a motion to proceed.
Well, I was going to ask you, Casey, where are we with this now?
Sure. Well, one point first, we have 2 sewer pump stations downstream as well that are inundated typically with heavy storms. Again, this could, if designed well, could assist with that as well.
Do we have overflows at those two? I don't think so.
Washington Street, I'm sorry, the one that's right behind Montgomery Avenue, right on Montgomery Avenue. The water laps at the door.
Yeah.
They have to sandbag it typically during a heavy storm. So water doesn't go down to the well. As to your question, the developer is in final review with Rick, and this is essentially just another portion of the subdivision that would have to occur. It's already marked out on their plans to subdivide it, but it's based, I told the developer, it's based on tonight's discussion with the board if they want to move ahead, so.
Okay, so you do need an approval then?
Yes.
Just to sort of think, just delineate the parcel,
Yep.
Rick, on there.
It's the red line right
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
So basically, the only change to the existing land development plan is to put that red line in as meets the town's border.
And it does not affect their land development at all for the front parcel.
Yeah, they
Doesn't
meet
affect
their
their
area
space
bulk
or-
requirements
Yeah.
with the development as it stands without that additional.
Thanks.
Let me just ask you a couple of questions. Is there any legal liability on the part of the township if we assume ownership of that particular parcel? To be of concern.
No more than any other open space we already own.
No?
Okay.
Park or anything else? Same thing.
And how about, would there be any, and not considering any improvements, capital improvements done to that area, would there be any maintenance costs? If we took over ownership of it and not doing anything to it, would there be anything that our parks folks would have to deal with as far as that area is concerned?
No, currently the school district does not maintain it at all now. It's typically scrub, trees, and nothing worthwhile in there right now. The only concern is we would be responsible to, if we had any, there's historically along this corridor has been a homeless problem with camps on this property and others. That's the only downside I see, but we assist the police and the county with those efforts anyway, typically, so that's the only downside I see is, evicting the homeless camp.
Is there any situation where there's been some illegal dumping that we find when we get in there, there's no other responsible party that we can identify, we're on the hook to clean up something that we didn't know about?
I've not heard of any dumping in this area at all, other than the homeless camps with their material that they leave behind. But it's pretty inaccessible. You'd either have to come right through the Spellman Building property from the front. Our yard is in the back, and there's no vehicular access really from Turner Lane. There is that paper street that comes into the pump station, but that's about it.
Is it worth doing any kind of phase 1 study just to say we're convinced there's no underlying problem here environmentally?
I guess you could, but when you do a phase 1 study, you come to us and ask us if there's any history of environmental
Anything in the
issues.
file, and there's nothing in the file.
There is not. This ground has never been used for anything commercially or industrially.
There's never been any development.
It's just been open space, so, other than maybe cleaning that up a little bit and any stormwater improvement, I don't see what the potential for environmental.
And it's been a school district building since 1923, so.
All right, so Hugh made a motion, and I'll make a second.
Okay. Is there any public comment?
Yeah, I would just mention what about a phase 2, where you at least do some sampling, either soil or water, so you don't end up in a potential hazardous waste situation. I mean, you still have runoff, you have things that could be there, even though it's never industrial, you still have a lot of other potential contaminants that could contribute to the property. So I'd recommend phase 2. Something that costs you wants to do sampling. And you know what you're up for. You don't want to get into a hazardous waste situation that's very costly. Most likely you'll find nothing, but it's worth, I think, peace of mind to do something like that. You do have some industry around there, you have,
This is the only section of Goose Creek that runs through West Goshen, right? Like behind Kmart?
Yeah, definitely. As soon as you hit DK Diner, it goes into the park.
I agree.
Lunch.
I do want to come forward. Can I turn this on?
Up.
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay. I did want to come forward because I do want to be on record saying that I adamantly oppose this from the little bit of research I did. First of all, I guess as Tina was saying, Lasco Industries is just to the north there, so that's a big industrial site. I don't understand all that environmental stuff, but I think it would be worth testing this property. A question for Mr. Craig, is that an intermittent or perennial stream?
Perennial.
Okay, so it's always running.
Oh,
Yes, always.
Okay, and I heard this was an opportunity to naturalize the stream bank or naturalize the wetlands. Wouldn't you call it naturalized now?
yeah, but the existing riparian conditions can be improved.
Okay,
Especially with native plants.
so the developer still has not purchased the land from Westchester Area School District, correct?
I don't know, we don't have the access to those, that
Well,
information.
okay, according to
Agreement
the,
of sale.
okay, according to the deed records, Chester County, it is still owned by Westchester Area School
They
District.
probably have to get their land development approval before they're going to sell it.
Okay, so is the school district, do they have knowledge of this transaction?
I don't know.
I'm just curious about, they're under agreement of sale for a purchase price, I imagine. And I'm just trying to figure out how that works when,
And 10.83 acres are unusable for anything.
I know, but there's a purchase price for 16.67 acres.
Mm-hmm.
So Stanberry would still be purchasing the 16 and the subdivision happens after it's sold to Stanberry?
Correct.
Okay, and then so it could not be legally subdivided until it's officially sold to Stanberry.
No, they will get the subdivision first and then go to sell them after.
I'm just making sure all the
Not
T's
sure
are
of your
crossed
question.
here.
Okay, I'm just not sure of your question.
Okay. Now, we've already set a precedent that we can go in on private property and do stormwater improvements as just completed at the Idlewild Homeowners Association. So I don't think we need to own this property if we really think there's beneficial stormwater improvements to be had on this property. I think we just talk to Stanberry and get an access and do it. I don't know why we would want, I just don't know why we would want to own the swampland. Just been following the stormwater issue for a long time. 2 or 3 years ago, we got another piece of property. It didn't cost us a dime. It was just transferred. And we ended up spending a couple $100,000 on stormwater improvements, or we either have or we will be. So it just seems to me, resident looking in, that we're looking throughout the township, where can we purchase or be gifted some land so we can do stormwater improvements to justify the stormwater fee that we will implement in 2022. So I just want to go on record. I think this is just a very unwise decision, and I just hope perhaps you get some studies done and you don't vote on anything tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Monty.
Will the board consider,
Somebody just, can I just ask a question? So based on that comment, so if we wanted, and this, if we didn't take ownership of this property, and it was deemed that, you know, it's a really good piece of property to do a stormwater improvement project on, well, we could still pursue the kind of avenue that we've had with some of the other private property owners, correct?
Not
Or is there a
exactly.
downside?
The issue with Idlewild is there are existing facilities there which are already being maintained by the HOA, we're improving those, and then the HOA is going to agree to continue to maintain them. If we go into a private property owner and say, we want to do a whole bunch of improvements here, and yeah, we'll pay for that, but then, by the way, you've got to maintain them where they have no maintenance responsibility now, I don't see why any private developer would want to do that.
You could enter into a contract with them for the purchase of the property contingent upon the results of phase 2 assessment.
Yeah.
And still have them on the hook for the remediation if there isn't.
And that's a separate topic that we just explored here around do we own it in the first place.
No, I agree. I don't see a downside to any acquisition of open space. I look at this as an opportunity. We're going to need to make improvements anyway. We have a catastrophic stormwater issue going on in the township right now, and that's the result of many years of neglect. And so this looks like a really great opportunity for us to address some of that. And no one said anything about a stormwater fee, but we will need to pay for it somehow, just like we pay for everything else that we need to live in this township.
Yeah. There should be some grant opportunities for something that we would want to pursue. But I want to go back to that meeting that we had several months ago with the borough arborist and the CRC folks. There's a lot of things that can be done in this area. Even though the stream is there and it's constantly running, there's so much invasive species there, and the grasslands and trees and all that. There's ways in which you can regrade all of that and plant the proper kind of vegetation there that would become more permeable. And that's the whole idea here with getting control of that space. We will be in a position to be able to do that and help hopefully mitigate some of the flooding further downstream than down there in Montgomery Avenue.
Right,
Maybe just part of the solution.
To see the flooding at Montgomery Avenue and then say, well, yeah, we passed up on an opportunity. They own a huge part of the stream that can be used to fix that problem is stupid. And so I think that we should absolutely take this part.
This is the
And
headwinds.
actually, that's not quite true. We could have a project here, to Rick's point. We can do it, but we can't force them to maintain it after we've done it. So the real point there is that if you're going to spend this money, whether it's grant funded or not, or part funded, and you don't ultimately have control so that in 10 years it's not degraded back again, you've wasted the money.
Right.
So that's where ownership is more attractive in that sense.
And I'm not so sure we would be successful with the DCNR or a greener grant if we didn't control the property. Rick, would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, they're definitely going to want to look at
There
the
would have to be
maintenance
a
because they're not going to
perpetual
spend
maintenance
money on
agreement.
something
Yeah.
that may not
Yeah.
be maintained.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think it would be more favorable to be the owner than depending on somebody else to maintain the improvement.
Phase 2 study, Tina, what is that, 10 grand, 20 grand, 10 acres?
Depends on what you want to do. If you want to do water, soil sample, if you want to get into groundwater wells, usually that's what you do.
We could talk to Stanbury and see if they would fund that as part of it, because they're looking to give the property to the township for free, so,
Knock 20,000 off.
yeah.
Yeah, I think your highest cost is going to be your analytical. Because it's the unknowns. You're probably going to have to do a full gamut, not knowing what, Lasco's there, of course, so you know what their constituents is. So that's probably going to be your highest cost. You can do core samples and not have to get a drill rig out there, which should be a lot cheaper. So, to be safe, you probably want to do 20,000. You're talking 10 acres, that's fairly, probably just downgrading, a little downgrading.
We should see if they can make that.
Well, yeah, no, I just want to understand what it is. If they say, no, you're still interested, what are we talking about? If we make a motion tonight or something.
The other thing I was considering, because the borough is going to get some benefit of the work, $1 million or whatever it's going to cost, maybe you can ask them to fund some of the funding for getting the area where
Well, so that kind of brings us back to our conversation with Michael Dunn. They're trying to put together sort of a Goose Creek Association project that they're going to get everybody to buy into.
Right.
And so one of the things that they were talking about Goshen about is, you guys own this, or you have this part running through your township.
Right.
So, we're trying to work on the borough to come together on a project. The borough owns that we own this particular piece of the creek and that we're working to make improvements to Montgomery Avenue, and yes, we might be more likely to finance something.
Yeah, it's worth, it's going to benefit at large. So it'd be nice to go after them and say, would you contribute some of this for what we're doing?
I don't think they're going
They're
to.
not going to
Yeah.
continue.
Chris has a comment or a question.
I just had a comment. We looked we did look into it as part of the discussion, and the board could allocate a portion of the Rescue Plan Act funds that are received towards a remediation project on this property.
We already,
I think we've allocated all of the current,
Well, we're getting a second
yeah,
allocation.
second tranche we could.
Yeah.
So you could do that.
We've got a lot of competing projects, so it's
Yeah,
we wanted, we look at it, so.
I'm just throwing it out there, I'm just saying it's an option to
So
consider.
one step at a time. Right now, it's, do we want to own this? So at some point in the future, we can go in there and do a project that would be beneficial. So whether it's how like it's funded or whatever down the road. But to own the parcel, you know, we currently have a motion in a second, so I need to know whether you want to modify that to include contingent upon phase 2 study that is satisfactory to the township.
Yep, I do, and
You can make a motion to okay making that amendment?
Yes.
so is the asking of Stanberry to fund that part of the, okay.
It will be part of the motion. We want a phase 2 study done at the expense of the Stanberry LLC, whatever they are, and the results to be satisfactory to the township.
And just for my clarification, what does a phase 2 study encompass?
basically what you're doing is, it's actually phase 1 and a phase 2 combined. Usually we don't do one without the other. So phase 1 is more like, this is what I have in the scope of the area, this is what the potential contaminants could be as a result of phase 1. So it's more like a paper study in the phase 1. And then you get into phase 2, which is the actual either coring or drilling of groundwater monitoring wells, or just taking core samples depending on the depth of groundwater. And then you're taking that soil sample into a groundwater and you're analyzing it for certain
That's to ensure there's no toxic materials in the ground or anything of that
Yeah,
nature?
they have to look from the phase 1 to see what potentially could have contributed to that area as to what you're going to sample in phase 2.
Okay.
And then maybe a little bit more because you don't know what that.
So we would ensure we're not purchasing or getting a toxic dump, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and what would happen is you would then, that would go back to the owner of the property to have to clean that up.
Okay.
Which
So-
begs the question, the school district would have to give us permission to do this. Yes, to study it, because they're the current property owner.
Right.
And I'm not
They
so
have to,
sure.
they'll decide whether you can do it or not.
Yeah, I'm not so sure, I'd have to check, I don't know if we would have access to that, I'm not sure this school district didn't do one already, to get it ready for sale.
Let's check with the,
May have already done phase 1.
Yeah, I mean, we're not privy to that as part of the land development,
And
so.
then would the school district be responsible for cleaning
If they
anything
did.
up?
yes.
Yeah, so
They had
I
to
don't think they
coordinate.
could have gone to sale if they had any issues.
But the
Yeah,
other,
so
I'll
we
check
should
with-
see if that exists already.
Yeah.
well, the other thing we want to look at, if they did do it, is to see what constituents they sampled for. That's like going for blood work, and not going for the right blood work, and you're not finding what the issue is.
But if they've done a phase 1, Tina, then surely they would have appropriately, I mean, they may have only done a phase 1 and said there's no risk to this property and everyone's happy, both partners were happy. We're the ones saying we want to do the sampling. So that's when the school district may say, we don't want you sampling there, we've already got a bill of sale, go away. They may say that, because you don't know if you find something, now the school district has to spend to clean it up. Right now, they can sell the property and be done with it. So,
Well, they could, because in West Goshen, you're not required to do phase 2, which is another thing that I think should be done with all properties, that's what I think, commercial properties.
Keep in mind the proximity to, excuse me, Tina, to Eldridge. Eldridge is just a couple hundred yards north of there, and they're under watch by the DEP for all their hazardous groundwater and such.
I mean, that's a decision the board would have to make at that point. If they're not willing to, the school district's not willing to
Yeah.
allow it, then you say we'll pay for the.
Yeah, let's cross that bridge.
so right now we have
That's
a
down the
motion
road.
to proceed with this on the condition that a phase 2 study is complete.
I would do.
And then if we're told that the phase 2 study has been done, and we'd like to see the results, if it hasn't been done, and the school board says you can't do one, then we'll have to regroup.
Yeah.
Yeah, take a plan B.
Right.
But I think it's worth pursuing a plan B,
Yeah.
even if it might cost some money to do so.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Any other final comments from Margie or Tina? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Okay, you're getting watching orders at Katie, right? Good. Next on the agenda is item number 7, discussion of splash pad grant opportunity and approval for engineering work to commence. I believe Chris is quick through this one. Okay.
Yes.
So Chris, you provided a memo to the board explaining the grant opportunity. You want to just kind of headline that for us?
Yes. So there is, in looking at the cost for the splash pad that was reviewed by the board on September 21st, there's a potential for a grant opportunity with Chester County through their Park and Trail Improvement Program. This project would be eligible for up to 50% of the construction costs, up to $250,000. Based on the estimates that have been received, the township at this time would be eligible for a grant of approximately $205,000, which does not include the administrative costs such as design, bidding, contract administration, etc., as well as any work that would be done by the Public Works Department. So this would just be to cover the site work and installation. In order to get that in a position where it would be ready to submit, the board would need to consider authorizing Carroll Engineering to begin the necessary site work and design for the project, even if it's just to prepare a sketch plan, and then provide a more up-to-date construction cost breakdown for the application, and we'll need general recreation to provide an updated estimate for materials, because I don't believe they included the shade structure that was discussed at the September 21st meeting in their estimate. The deadline, we still have some time. The deadline for this application is February 25th of 2022, and then they typically announce awarding sometime around May. So in order to proceed forward, we would also need a letter of support from the Parks and Rec Board and from the Planning Commission, and there would need to be a resolution considered by the Board of Supervisors, but that could be later down closer towards the deadline once we have the final costs in hand. The SAC has also been discussing the establishment of a community garden that could be included in this application since they're all on the same property. However, I didn't factor that into the cost because I don't know what the costs for that are going to be, but I don't know if it would be $45,000.
I think that we need to have a discussion in the SAC and revisit the community garden, because given all the projects that we're going to have going on, basketball courts, bathrooms, splash pad, the rationale behind having that spigot, obviously everything's going to be open, so it makes sense and it makes sense, but we aren't in a position on the sustainability thing right now to bring a design to the board, how big that garden is going to be, who's going to maintain it, so there's work that needs to be done on that front. I don't know if that still means that the board wants to put the spigot in for an eventual use, but.
Well, we can be open-minded during the design phase, realize that that's something we potentially would want, and we can see if there's some, small measures that we can take so it won't be that hard to accommodate in the future. Chris, if we were to move forward this, how much do we need to get Carroll? I mean, is it full design for them to come up with the full cost and the sketches that are needed for the grant submission, or is it just kind of a subset to get going and it's what are you talking about dollar-wise to do that?
I don't know what it would be dollar-wise. The estimate they provided to do the administration of everything was $24,000. I can ask Chris Peterson for a more accurate cost estimate. We would really just need a sketch plan. It wouldn't have to be fully engineered.
I would like to break it down into those two pieces. What was it to just get us through this initial phase and come up with the grant application?
Based on my experience, probably a couple $1,000, I'd say. Maybe around $5,000, I'd estimate.
So we go not to exceed amount tonight, or would you want us to approve a not to exceed amount so they can do the work, but could this come after you've already gone through the Planning Commission and the Park and Rec Board?
Probably a not to exceed amount would be a good idea. Because all we need right now from Carroll would be a sketch plan and a construction cost breakdown. Which, Casey, do you think 5 sounds reasonable?
I would think so.
Whether or not to exceed, we hope it'll be less, right?
Yeah, just to be safe, I would suggest maybe 10,000 for not to exceed, just to be safe. Because they will have to come up with a sketch plan, they'll have to do some initial survey work. And all of our parks have been surveyed, they can take that base data and use it, so they don't have to come out and do a full.
Let me just double check with the board. So if we don't get a grant, we didn't have a grant in our conversation, we talked about moving
Yeah,
forward with this
exactly.
anyway, so this would be, great to get, but we're still kind of all on board with making this amenity become available down the road. So we have the funding in the what's it called, that fund?
Capital
Restricted park.
Restricted Parks Fund.
And this is
this
a
is key
huge
project,
investment
so-
to get that rolling anyway,
Yeah.
so.
And it comes out of restricted park. Yeah.
So does anyone want to make the motion to approve a not to exceed amount of $10,000 for Carroll Engineering in the necessary planning
We'll make a motion.
for this project?
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other board questions or comments? Are there any public questions or comments? Okay, hearing none,
I would just suggest that we put the spigot in regardless. That's my request.
Yeah.
In relative to the SACPA.
I think once we get the sketch, we understand the layout of the plan, then you can say, the best down the road will be in this area for the community garden, so
Yeah.
why can't we put one fixture over here that we potentially utilize?
It would be cheaper to do it now than
Yeah,
go back
let's
to
kind of
the-
guess it now, let's
Yeah.
just kind of see how it lays out, and then
Yeah.
the SEC can look at it, when the design is
Plumb the
ready
service
to
line.
bid.
The question I had, Chris, you said it was $25,000 for engineering. What was that for?
The estimate that I had heard was $24,000 for administration, which was design work, bidding, contract, and contract administration.
Is that
So-
engineering too?
Yes, the design work would be the engineering.
Okay,
And the one, if the community garden isn't included in this application, since the SAC has more work, we could always submit an application for the 2023 round towards to do that. This program, because I worked at Malvern, we had two grant applications running at the exact same time through this program, so it's not like if you have one, you can't apply for another one. So
Are you less likely to get it?
No, I got two, I got one in 2020 and one in 2021.
Wow. And so you get it's reimbursed after
Correct.
the project's
Yeah.
complete, or after you, okay.
Reimbursable, and you have it's a 3-year contract to complete. from award.
Oh, so you have 3 years after the application is submitted and approved in order to do the work?
Correct.
Okay.
But wouldn't it be advantageous and help to have the community garden as part of the plan in getting the grant?
Not necessarily,
No.
no.
That could be a standalone grant by itself.
So I just thought that would help, knowing you're doing something for the community and it's.
Not necessarily. Having multiple projects doesn't make it more advantageous for you.
I think we have a pretty big elephant here already, in terms of our project, between fixing the basketball court, getting the bathroom put in, and the new splash pad, just
And
easy to see.
during our last SAC meeting, Henry is kind of, he had a lot of questions about who's gonna maintain the garden, and I think we really need to have a plan in place about that kind of thing.
Yeah, and how large?
Yeah, how big it is, and we really haven't gotten there yet, so, I agree. I still think we should put the piping in, maybe just to, yeah.
And after speaking with the county, there's going to be some policy decisions that the board's going to have to make regards to if a community garden's implemented, like who would have access to it, things
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
The only open question I had on the splash pad, and I don't think it's a problem, but I would like Mike Martha to
We've been
make a statement relative to, he's not got a problem with 100 gallons a minute, 5 hours a day through 4 or 5 months, whatever it is. I think it's about 1% of the flow per day, but I need him to say it's acceptable and that we don't have to put
we actually,
$300,000 into biggest sewer main off the plant.
we've actually had that discussion the last couple of weeks, and he is now, it would violate our sewer ordinance. So to
Public
pipe
water
and
is-
sanitary, absolutely.
So where's it going down?
Well, Rick and I were talking about it today. We have that adjacent large basin where kids play t-ball right now. That is because you're not just talking the 3 months of when the splash pad's in use with aqua being pumped and drained. This is essentially a catch basin because those the catch facilities that catch the water from the spigots catch rainwater too. So this will collect water year round. And we have to have a place to send it, not into the sanitary sewer. So we're talking today just hypothetically that we'll pipe it over to the basin, but that basin is 25 years old, way out of current design for stormwater improvement. So Rick and I were just spitballing some ideas about some innovative stormwater uses that we could naturalize the basin.
We could have a level in it. We could during the summer. Would you like to maintain a level in the basin or not?
I mean, that could be a possibility. I was thinking more towards underground infiltration.
Yeah.
Underground storage and infiltration, possibly even using some of it for irrigation.
Okay, so that's now another part of this project, then, right?
Yes.
So how do we
It's
get it?
essentially an illicit discharge into our sanitary.
No, it would have been.
Yeah.
But we're not doing it. But now we
Right,
have
right.
a new design.
Now we have a
that is-
stormwater issue.
Now we have a stormwater issue.
issue.
Exactly, yeah.
So how is that going to come into the cost estimate that we're going to look at for a budget review?
It's going to have to be included.
Is there a grant possibility for the basin?
I don't know the answer to that. The basin alone from this project, or
Well,
basin is a part of this project?
If it's also collecting other
I
water.
think you'd have to look at whatever grant you're looking to use for the splash pad and see if it would include the stormwater to go along with it. There's no grant that I'm aware of just for the stormwater.
I don't think so, because we did the grant we did a park improvement grant in 2020. I don't think the stormwater was part of that, was allowed to be part of that application. So I don't.
Is stormwater allowed to be part of restricted park funds?
You're making improvements to the park, so yes, you can.
And we did factor in the total estimate of everything we had at the time, a month ago when we reviewed capital, was $435,000, I think, was everything we did. So we added $65,000 on top of that estimate just to cover inflated costs and the shade structure and any other additional work that might be
Nothing to
necessary.
do with the basin, no.
No.
No, that's just been the last.
So I remember Christine was a little, I thought it was okay, but she was concerned we didn't have enough money in restricted parts to do that, plus the capital equipment purchases, plus.
And I don't know that we do, and I don't know that, in my personal opinion, we should be doing all these projects at the same time. I think we should wait till we get a second wind from what?
Which is next June.
Yeah,
Next June, July.
I think that we can put the basketball courts and something else off for a year or two.
Well, to have an amenity that's not usable is a problem to me.
Yeah, we're gonna have to close the courts. They're-
We should
they're
put the
district
courts
areas.
into use as a residence.
We've had some injuries there with the pavement cracking, so.
So we do need to do some project. But the additional bathroom and the splash pad is something we need to do.
Well, the bathroom thing was the whole thing. We're going to be opening up that whole area.
Yeah.
But what about the bathroom in the other park? Is there another bathroom?
That's the only one.
Really?
Equipment is another.
I thought I saw,
Playground equipment. Okay, so for right now, tonight, actually, do we want to proceed with the motion in the second, or do you want to withdraw it? Or was it John, you made
Right now, we just want to authorize Carol to go ahead and proceed with that sketch plan and do construction cost estimate.
I mean, we're not going to proceed with the project next year. We wouldn't submit a grant, so we don't really need the work doing. So we don't need to move forward tonight with it if we don't want to feel committed to it. We can certainly wait another week or two on this mode. We have a good December workshop, right?
Yeah,
So do you wish to withdraw
yeah,
your motion?
that's fine.
Okay.
yeah, we can wait.
Well, thanks, Chris, and I'm sorry we couldn't take action tonight, but it was
Not
a
a
good
problem.
conversation. That was good news. Well, it was interesting news.
It's not good news. But again, we didn't have a cost for the upgraded sanitary facilities either, so.
I mean, that's true.
You know, I mean, we would have had to.
Yeah, we were assuming it was
buy it,
adequate.
you know, and the additional treatment cost, which is not a lot, but still put it back down the plan, so.
Well, but couldn't we also draw money from one of the other stormwater projects? Like, are there other basins that we have lined up to retrofit instead?
Yes.
And instead do that one, you know?
Well, it depends what watershed it's
Oh,
in.
that's right, yeah, it's all watershed based, so we'd have to be careful not to.
So you guys have given it some more thought relative to what would be required, kind of ballpark costs, so we can be ready to discuss it hopefully next week too, right? As part of whether we continue to go forward with this project in 22. Yeah? We're all on the same page, and that we'll be able to come to a conclusion as to whether we can include the splash pad project in our budget after next week's meeting, or does it need more time?
Well, I can't give you any firm costs for stormwater because we've done no feasibility studies, no.
So what we will have though is here's how much the project costs as it is, and this is the margin you've got left with restricted parks account. And
Yeah,
you
we
can
can
say,
do that analysis.
oh, that's plenty of money, or you can say, oh, that could all go on stormwater.
Yeah.
We'll be in that position next week.
That works.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks. That was agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 8. Discussion of possible approval of the sludge hauling bid for the wastewater plant. Casey.
Yeah, so we received 2 bids for the 2022 sludge hauling for the sewer treatment plant. The bid was advertised on October 1st in the Daily Local News. And the low bidder was, I believe we've had Charles Blazinski Disposal for generations. They're typically the low bidder. For 3 25-yard dumpsters, and this is to haul away the sludge that is produced by the plant. And of course, with the new screw presses that have been installed, it's a much more efficient, much more, it's a better process, yeah, exactly, drier cake, but it's producing more. So Charles Blazinski was the low bidder at $333 per load.
The load is how much, Casey?
It's 25 yards. So, and they typically fill them over the brim. So
Yeah.
they tarp them and take them up to Lancaster.
How's it compare with current price?
Oh yeah. So the 2021 bid, the 2022 bid from Blazinski represents an increase of $18 per dumpster.
18 on 330.
Correct.
Okay, so that's 6%.
Yep. And the total increase, because again, the new screw presses and the more production that they've been achieving, although the weight is down, but that's a different measure because we pay tipping fees separate. I'm sorry, this is all part of it. I'm sorry, take that back.
It's just per
It's just per load, exactly. So Mike's estimating we'll have an increase to our, to his budget of $4,500 because of just the more volume that they're putting out, which is better for everything.
Well, that's for the code, I guess.
Exactly, absolutely. That's all in. So, and the next lowest bidder was Solid Waste Services, also known as Mascaro and Sons, just as a comparison, $550 a load compared to $330.
United Site Services, have they bid in the past?
They have. They will. I think they did in the last few years, and their prices are typically almost double of Blazinski.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious why there's such a great distinction, the discrepancy between the lowest and the next bidder.
Yeah, I mean, they're coming from Audubon, which is 45 minutes to an hour from here.
Honeybrook's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, Honeybrook's 35 minutes, but Lancaster landfill is that direction. Audubon's Montgomery County, so it's the wrong direction for that.
Well, we're required by law to take the lowest bidder anyway, right?
Correct, yes, yeah.
There's really no discussion here.
So you would make a motion to accept the low bid from Charles Blazinski for the sludge hauling for 2022. Is there a second?
Yep.
Thank you, Ashley. Any other board comments or questions? Any public comments or questions?
I just have a question. I'm just, nothing to do with their contractor, they can help it, but I'm just wondering with the Kodak, we're kind of playing with it now. I'm just wondering if it's going to increase maybe a lot higher, plus $4,500
But I mean, like, what we don't know is how variable the amount's
Yeah.
gonna be, the price is gonna be.
Yeah, the price is the same.
It's still pretty low no matter what.
I'm just wondering if we're going to exceed the budget because of the cone act.
Well, that's
Operation.
like,
Yeah.
risk factor.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, Margie.
When I look at the treasurer's report, I see what appears to be sludge hauling to a company called Wind River Environmental.
So, Margie, right now we're commissioning that new building with all the new equipment for the phosphorus removal. And we've had, as part of the whole installation, we put in new equipment for the dewatering of the sludge.
Okay.
And because of all the activity going on, Mike sometimes has to bring Wind River in to take the liquid out because he doesn't have the manpower, the resource, the equipment's not, ready for the sludge pressing. So you've got both Wind River, which should stop or be very much reduced, and you've also got Brzezinski on this
Perfect.
list.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Thank you. Agenda item number 9, approval of the bills to be paid for the general fund, the sewer revenue fund, the waste and recycling fund, and the capital reserve fund. You has made a motion for the bills to be paid. Is there a second? I'll second that. Is there any board questions or comments on the bills? Are there any public comments or questions? Margie?
Yeah, do you all have the report in front of you? On the prepaid bills to be paid, I think it's the last and the second last page, it notates the Vanguard funds.
The last page on prepaid fund 90.
Page 6 of 6.
Yeah, well, let's go to 4 to 6 and then 6 to 6. So 4 to 6, we see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 payments to the Vanguard funds.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, there's like 4 different payments for admin and roads, and it seems to add up to more than I remember that was in the budget. So is there a reason for that 4 different payments for admins and roads?
I don't know. I'll check with Christine. And on page 6 of 6, those are just a salary contribution.
Yeah. So page 3, are those the state funds that came in?
Well, yeah.
Or that's the sewer fund, isn't it? Fund 08?
Yes, that's the sewer fund. So all of those are, it's a mix of the pass-through money, the state aid, and the MMO money that we have to pay.
Okay.
So,
Or maybe you can just ask Christine
Sure.
to provide an explanation around the numbers that are in the bills that are being, money that's being moved out to Vanguard, and the breakdowns to the source of it. Okay, thank you, Mike. Any other questions? Any board questions? Had a chance to look at it a little more? No? Have a motion and a second, ready to take a vote. All those in favor of paying the bills, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Approval made. Last agenda item tonight is number 10, public comment. Are there any questions or comments from the public?
Yeah, I have a couple. Just a couple moving forward in anticipation of next week. Last year's budget did not include the required management discussion, and I just hope that 2022's budget, I pulled one from 2015, and this is quite an in-depth and thorough 5-page manager's message.
That should be prepared after the final budget's approved, right?
that goes into the final budget, not preliminary.
Won't be next week.
No, we don't do that until final, because the board can change the budget
Yes.
completely until December 21st.
It gives a picture of,
I don't do that until the final budget, honestly.
We're going to have a presentation that provides a pretty comprehensive picture, just as we did last year. We'll have all the assumptions, and we'll have a line-by-line budget, and the management summary will be done with the
Okay.
planning group.
I'm disappointed that, just want to say that I'm disappointed that that's not included in the proposed final budget. I mean,
No,
it tells.
it will be in the
It's
final
in the
budget.
final budget.
It won't be the preliminary
Okay.
budget.
And I did, after a meeting, maybe 2 meetings ago, when we were discussing timesheets, I did receive a packet of timesheets, and I do want to discuss that because there are some employees that clearly showed working half-day. It shows they came in at 8 and left at 12. But then in the timesheet, it does show they worked 8 hours. And is that acceptable?
Well, you don't have the whole picture, Margie.
Okay, please tell it to me. I'd like to know it.
The 2 employees that you were targeting
Okay.
were working a split shift for us because we were still under COVID. We did not have vaccinations. We had, if you recall, we had our front desk set up out front. Do you remember that? Well, because we were not allowing people in. They were our 2 Park and Rec employees who did not have a Park and Rec program to administer. So I assigned them to desk duty for those times. And in order to, since no one was vaccinated here, we didn't have access to vaccines, I wanted them as 2 shifts in the night, not meeting. So in case, just like we did with the police and public works, they were working split shifts. So they're both salaried employees, they're not hourly. Both employees put in dozens, if not hundreds of hours extra a year at no compensation. I split their shifts, so one would work morning, one would work in the afternoon here, and they would work from home for the rest of the day.
Okay, first of all, I wasn't targeting any specific employees.
You and I spoke on the phone about it. Do you remember that I gave you that same explanation over the phone?
Yeah. Okay, but this is entirely different. These are issues, these are timesheets that I didn't share with anybody else, but here, an employee in at 8 a.m., out at noon, but shows 8 hours, and then shows early dismissal. And as a taxpayer, I just think that's fine. If the township manager wants to use his discretion and allow the employees to leave half day, they still need to subtract hours from their vacation or their personal bank time. I mean, to see employees filling out timesheets that clearly show that this one came in at 9 and left at 1, but it's showing standard time is 8 hours. I just think that there's something inherently wrong with that.
Is this when
I don't know what she's referring to.
I don't know what you're referring to either, but was this back in January of 20?
No, this was Memorial Day weekend.
Oh, so it was the Friday before Memorial Day?
Right.
Okay, we've had this discussion with the board, and they were granted early dismissal because it was the Friday before Memorial Day.
Okay. Next year, I do think, I mean, if they leave early, they have hundreds of hours of vacation and personal sick time.
Hundreds of hours.
Why are they not required to subtract those from their hourly sick time or personal
I'll
time?
address that. I'll address that.
Margie, I addressed that with you before, that we allow the manager to provide discretion for employees to leave early on Friday before a holiday weekend. It's been a practice for decades, and it's acceptable to the board. So thank you for your statement. Do you have any other questions?
I did, just, what was it? Our township auditor, I'm looking at an audit they performed on another township, and it doesn't matter which one it is, or when it was, but it was performed by our auditor. And one of the things they recommended, I didn't highlight it. During our current year audit, we noted that the township does not have written procedures for preparing, adopting, monitoring, and amending the budget. And in all the years I've been following our budget, I've never seen us amend the budget during the year or even have a discussion where we monitor it.
We amended the budget during COVID in 2020. We did a mid-year budget review, and we adjusted certain expenses and projections at the time. That was on a virtual meeting. This year we did a budget review, I forget if it was in July or August, and we reviewed the mid-year outcomes, and no changes were made this year. So we have a public process. I believe it's at the board's discretion as to how often we need to review the budget.
sorry, whose audit is that? You said it's not ours?
It's not our audit, though, right?
Okay, so I'm not sure.
Honestly, it was East Coventry's from 2006.
Oh, so maybe they don't have a written.
I don't need it, Monty. I mean, if you have our policy that says, if you have an audit outcome that says we don't have a policy, then I don't believe we have that.
Okay, and again, just one last, I mean, I've been harping out whatever board I stand in front of for the past 6 years. I still feel that the budgeting process does not include the citizens. I can look on West Whiteland or the borough or all our neighboring municipalities, and they all have their working budgets can be found online. And people know way before the proposed budget for the following year. They know months in advance. They can see what you all are looking at and have an opportunity to comment and participate in the process. And I think we can improve on that. So I hope it's coming. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other questions? You just made a motion to adjourn, a second. Thank you. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. We're all adjourned. Thank you.
That's it? That's all you need for today.